Today I'm demonstrating 3 knitting increases. I'm going to demonstrate the yarn over, the knit into front and back of a stitch, and the make one. So let's start with the yarn over. I'm going to start by just knitting a couple stitches to get us away from the edge, because you're not often going to find a yarn over at the edge. So for a yarn over, all you're doing is literally exactly what it says. You're taking the yarn and you're wrapping it around the right needle, and then you're just going to keep right on knitting. Let me show you again. Just wrap the yarn around your right needle and keep knitting. I'm doing it the other way just to demonstrate. You can actually wrap the yarn either way, and it really doesn't matter for the most part, especially because you're normally just going to use yarn overs in lace knitting. And normally in the row following a yarn over, it's going to secure that little hole in some way, and it really doesn't matter. I don't think it necessarily leans one way or another. So the next thing I'm going to demonstrate is the knit into front and back of a stitch. I'm just going to finish this row really quickly. See, that's one yarn over right there. And there's the next one. See, it makes nice big holes, which work really nicely. And there's the other one for lace knitting. Okay, so now I'll demonstrate knitting into the front and the back of a stitch. Once again, I'm just going to knit a few stitches in, because normally you're not going to find an increase at the very beginning of a row. Okay, so to knit into the front and back of a stitch, you're going to start just by knitting a stitch like normal, but you're not going to remove this stitch from the left hand needle. You're going to keep it there. You're going to put your right needle tip into the back of that same stitch. You'll knit it, and then that's when you'll slide that stitch off. And you'll see right here, it does kind of resemble a knit stitch followed by a purl stitch, which that works just fine for a lot of knitting patterns. You just have to be careful about that. Let me demonstrate that for you one more time. Knit just like a normal knit stitch, but then instead of letting this needle drop off, this stitch drop off, you will keep it on that left stitch, the left needle. I can't talk. Then you'll slip that needle tip into the back, and you will knit just like that. Okay, and now I will show you how to do the make one. Before I do that, I just wanted to point out again, here are the holes that were created from the yarn over. You see how that will work very nicely for lace knitting, but you don't want to do a yarn over if you just need to do an increase for whatever other reason. Kind of like I mentioned in my blog post. Alright, so we're going to again knit a few stitches. Now the next thing we're going to do for the make one is we're going to kind of pull our needles apart. And you see this yarn bar, as I call it, right here between the two stitches? We're going to take that bar and we're just going to slip it onto our left needle. And then we're going to knit this needle, but we don't want to just knit it like this, because look at that huge gap. It's almost as bad as the yarn over a couple rows beneath it. So we're not going to knit it just like that. Instead, this is what I do. Now you could just kind of directly push that needle tip into the back of the stitch or the loop, and that works. that actually works quite nicely in this instance, probably because I'm using quite thick yarn. But what you can also do, if for whatever reason, if you're using much thinner yarn, or you're using a yarn that doesn't have a lot of stretch, let me show you again. Again, you want to pull apart those needles first, find that yarn bar, just kind of pick it up with your needle tip, place it on the left needle. What I will often do is I will kind of swirl or spin, I guess twirl would be a better term. I just kind of take my needle, I insert it into the front, and then I just kind of spin it up and over the left needle, and then I can knit that quite easily. You see how when you look back over the stitches, it's really quite difficult to tell which one was the make one, and even in the front you can't really tell either, which is one reason why the make one is such a popular increase. It's because it's almost invisible. You really can barely tell that it happened. I'm going to demonstrate it one more time. Just pick up that yarn bar, slip it onto the left hand needle, and knit it through that back loop. And again, it is a very invisible increase, and it's very useful. And so there you have it. Those are 3 ways to increase a stitch in your knitting.